Anthem. I'm recording this on Monday, March the 30th. So our situation continues. I think by now most of us will know that the president yesterday extended the guidelines for what we're doing through the end of April to April 30th. I know that I've talked to multiple people in multiple industries, and it is even before that announcement yesterday, that's pretty much what they were planning on, that April was going to be a shutdown month. And so while that is not any of the news that we would want, nobody wants that, but now we know. We know that the month of April, for the entire month, we're going to be in this temporary situation that we're in. So I just want to encourage you to continue to think that way, continue to say that. This is not the new normal. This is the temporary situation that we're in. So I want to speak to some things that now that we have an idea that it's going to be, that we know it's going to be at least for the month of April. We've talked about this last week. I've addressed, I've encouraged you to follow Henry Cloud. He has a lot of really good stuff to say about it, way smarter than I am. But he talks about three things that are really necessary: connection, structure, and control. And why I think this is important right now. We have this idea that we know that the virus is out there, we know that it's serious, and we want to do everything that we can do to not get it, not to pass it on. We're praying for God's protection like we talked about last week. We're praying for that shield of protection to come over us and make sure that we don't get sick. But now that we're in this idea of, or this, not idea, this very physical thing that we're doing, we have to be really careful about our emotional state and our mental state. And so this idea of understanding the importance of connection, structure, and control are very important. So it doesn't, what I would ask you to do is that you would not see these three things as just an idea or just something that somebody's using or I'm using to fill space for one of these things, okay? That is not what's going on. These things are very important to our mental health. Connection. You have to stay connected. Make sure you're calling people. Make sure that you're getting out and going for a walk. Even though if you see people in your neighborhood you don't know, at least you can wave to them. You see other human beings. Connection. Call your 5 people a day. Do your Facebook. Get on Zoom. We have in our church, we are starting 5 new online community groups. If you're not in a community group and you're not already Zooming with people and talking about yesterday's sermon and doing, I really ask that you would be a part of that. You go to our website, go to Adult Discipleship, click on that. It'll drop down. It'll take you right through it and how to sign up for that. So stay connected. The other thing is structure. Make sure that you're having structure. It's important. I would challenge you for the month of April to have a set time that you get up, a set time you go to bed, especially if you have children. Have a set time to read. Have a set time to exercise. Have a set time to do the things that you're doing. The more structure that you can put in, the better off that you're going to be. And so that's going to be important. And the other thing is control. So I've got to have the connection. That's on us. This is the role that we have to play here. I have to put structure in, so I need to have that structured out. And then I need to make sure that I am controlling the things that I control. Remember, Dr. Cloud talked about doing the T, and on one side, the things that I can control, and the other side, the things I can't control. You list off the things you can't control, worry about them for 10 minutes, and then close the book and be done with it. And then focus on all of the things that you can control. Well, what are some things that you control? You can control your amount of connection, and you can control your structure and how well that you're doing that. So those 3 things are very important for our mental state and for our health and for our emotional health. So let's make sure that we understand that and we're doing that. This is, 2-week vacation, which is for some people. And by the way, this is kind of what I'm beginning to see. You have people who have nothing to do, and you have people who have more work than they've ever had. And there seems to not be a whole lot of in between. So people who are working a ton and people who are barely working are not working at all. And so for those that are working hard, their connections there, their structures there, and their controls there. And for those of us that are finding ourselves with a lot more free time than we normally have, we have to really pay attention to this to make sure that we're doing those things. So we're 2 weeks in. We've had our 2-week vacation. Now the month of April, we're going to have to be very systematic. We're going to have to be very intentional in what we do for the month of April if we're going to come out of April healthier than we go in. So I'm going to give you some ideas of some things that you can do. One of the things that you can do is this. Take a gospel. Take the book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John and read it. Now read it with a journal. We'll talk about that how we need to have the Bible in one hand and a journal in the other. So take the book of Matthew or Mark or Luke or John, whichever one you want to take, and read it. And then in your journal, every time you come across a question that Jesus asked, write that question down. And just read through it. And every time he asks a question, you write the question down. Then go back to your journal and look at that question. And think about that question. Pray about that question. Ask, what does that question have to do with me? How can I apply? What kind of answer can I come up with? Another thing to do is you could read through a gospel and write down every miracle that you see. Or write down each teaching that Jesus has. And then journal about it. Think about it. Pray about it. Another thing to do is the book of Proverbs, and maybe you need to do both of these things. The book of Proverbs has 31 chapters in it. We know April is going to have 30 days. Read a Proverbs every day. Read on Wednesday, April the 1st, read Proverbs 1, and then the next day read Proverbs 2, but read it with a journal. Proverbs, sometimes there'll be 3, 4, 5 verses that go together. Most of Proverbs, the verses stand alone. And so as you read it, because if you just sit down and read it, it's going to take you about 5 minutes. Then you're going to look around and say, okay, what next? Read the proverb, write the proverb in your journal, and then think about, okay, what does this mean? How does this apply to my life? What would I need to change to follow this proverb? And list those things out and think about it and pray through it. Another thing you can do, or in addition to those, is take a book like Ephesians or Colossians or Philippians and commit to reading it every day for the entire month of April. So you take the book of Ephesians, which is a fantastic book, and you read the letter that Paul wrote to the Ephesians, and you read it every day for 30 days. At the end of those 30 days, boy, are you going to know the book of Ephesians. Now, you're going to read that book with a journal as well. Write down your questions. What does this mean? Pray through it. So those are 3 specific things that you can do. And your time with God and your focus on God in these 30 days is read a gospel, read Proverbs, read a book like Ephesians. It gives you some specific things to do. Here's what you want to stay away from, okay? You want to stay away from asking this question. What are we doing now? Because if you're having to ask that, what are we going to do now? Or if you're saying, or you find yourself saying, I'm bored, okay, then what you do is you do not have the structure that is needed. So you're going to have to sit down and have it structured out and say, this is what I'm going to do. This is when I'm going to read. This is what I'm going to read. This is how I'm going to read my Bible. This is how I'm going to journal. This is when I'm going to exercise. This is when I'm going to watch TV. This is when we're going to have dinner. This is when we're going to have lunch. The more structure you can put in, the way better that you're going to be. So I hope that's helpful to you. We know that we're in this for the next 31, 32 days at least. We're praying and we're hopeful that by May 1 things are back to normal. We have some things that we're working on as a church in addition to our Wednesday night Bible study that's this Wednesday at 6:30 and our live stream on Sunday morning, and we think that we're going to have that fixed. So what happened yesterday is not going to happen again. We have some other things that we're going to add, especially around Easter. I'm just not ready to make that announcement yet, so stay tuned. Maybe tomorrow we'll have some more specific things that we're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks, especially as it relates to around the Easter season. So I want to close by reading a passage of Scripture. It's a pretty common passage of scripture is from Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And in my Bible, the title of it says, A Time for Everything. For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stories and a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. We know what our time's going to be like in the month of April. Let's be diligent. We talk about these three things all the time. Things are not as they seem. We have a role to play, and we have an enemy. Let's focus on the role that we have to play for ourselves and for our family in this month of April. I'm here with you. We're doing this together. I'm going to come along and encourage you. I'm going to come back in a few days and ask you what you're reading. How's it going? We'll be adding some other things, like I said. So stay encouraged. We can do this. We're getting through this together. We can continue to do this together. And I can't wait to get us all back together very soon. Remember, temporary situation, not new normal. God bless.